Hi everybody, Hassan Shariq, regulated Canadian immigration consultant, back with our live session on Canadian immigration over the weekend. I hope all of you can hear me. If you guys can hear me, it would be great if in the chat section you guys can just comment if you can hear me well. I'm using a new software and I'm not really a techie person, so just wanted to confirm if using the chat function you guys can just send a message if you can hear me. Perfect. So Dream Canada, we have a confirmation that I am audible. So officially, welcome to the session. In today's session, what I am going to do is that first I'm going to start off with, as I do regularly, I'm going to start off with a few introduction or guidance on a specific topic, and then we'll take the questions. To begin with, first thing, in terms of the economic class, the skilled migration, some updates that I'd like to share. So we had our recent express entry draw over Thursday, Wednesday and Thursday. This has been a consistent thing where every 2 weeks IRCC has been conducting these draws. So this was all similar in that instance. But one of the differences between this particular draw and the previous draws was that they were always inviting 4,000 people jointly between PNP and CEC. But this time around it was 3,900. So they've reduced that number, which might be indicative of the fact that from now onwards, the number of invites every 2 weeks for the express entry draws will be less than 4,000. Why do I say that? And that's not an official thing, but that's knowing the facts that are there and my own opinion on that. Number one, keep in mind that every year IRCC has a target that they have to achieve or generally be around that particular number for various immigration streams. For the federal programs that they have, this time around, the target that they have is around 85,000. So looking at the number of invites that they've already done, and we are already midway through this year, time flies like anything. We are quite on track for that particular number. In fact, I would say we are a little ahead of the average number that should have been there. So it does seem that they might have sort of rectified that. A lot of news has been there as to because of the COVID situation, will there be a cut in numbers? There will not be a cut as of now. The official communication that has come from the government and all, as of now, there will not be a cut in number of invites for the skilled migration categories, at least by IRCC. Recently, there was a news that US has planned on cutting all the migrant visas, the skilled migrant visas, at least for this year. And officially, the Minister of Immigration as well as the Prime Minister have in a reaction to that stated that all those skilled people can definitely consider moving to Canada. So the numbers of skilled migration streams are not being cut. There might be some cuts in some other categories. Just giving you an example, so every year there's about 10,000 spots for parents and grandparents, wherein they are given permanent residence on the basis of their relation with their kids who are permanent residents or citizens of Canada. And that program usually opens in the beginning of year. This year it didn't happen, and then we had the COVID situation. So there's quite likely that this year we won't have that. So those 10,000 spots seem to be out. There might be some other instances where people might not be invited, or they might not be given permanent residency. But skilled migration numbers, most likely, what we have, the news, the communication that we have as of today, suggests that we will not have a cut in those numbers. So that's an important thing. One of the updates that I wanted to share was that for a lot of people who are applying for temporary visas from all around the world, people who are in various processes, and their applications are being processed. One of the challenges that was happening was that a lot of Canadian visa application centers all around the world were closed. So the good news is that a small number of of Canadian visa application centers in various parts of the world have opened up. It's not a huge number; it's a small number, but yeah, that's still a positive. So I know that the Canadian Visa Application Center in Abu Dhabi has opened up, so they have started doing some biometrics and some collection of documents. This still does not mean that the visa officers or the immigration staff has been sent back. They're still in Canada, but they can process a lot of applications while being in Canada as well. So that's the second update. In terms of, so I've done a video on that, and I'd encourage, if you go on the channel, you can find that video and you can have a look at it in detail. It was more about the composition of express entry pool as of right now, and my predictions in terms of how things will fall out because of that. So this particular week, once we had the express entry draws, IRCC shared the composition of the pool. So looking at that composition, this is the first time. So one consistent pattern that has been there is that every every second week, once we have the draw and we get to see the numbers, the overall number of people in express entry pool is declining. This time around, again, we saw that it moved to 143,000 people as the total number of people in the express entry pool. So there's a decline. So definitely that number is reducing. The more important number, people between the scores of 450 to 500. Now that is an important number because that is where a lot of applicants, especially the FSWP applicants, are sort of struck. So what was important in this particular week was that the number of people entering the pool between 450 to 500, that had an increase, but it had a small increase. The increase one was only about 290 people. So that was encouraging, because previously what we were saying, that although the overall number of people in the pool was declining, the number of people in the pool who had scores between 450 to 500, that was increasing. And a lot of them were CEC applicants, naturally, because when you do not have IELTS happening in a lot of parts of the world, when you're not able to have your ECS done, it's not so much of FSWP applicants coming into the pool. It was more so the CEC applicants. And that was creating more and more competition for not just the FSWP, but the CEC applicants themselves as well. But now with the CRS score dropping, and this time around we saw the score drop about 6 points, 6 CRS points for CEC applicants. This is positive, that whenever we have the FSWP draw, and that is another topic, I'll come to it in a few minutes. As soon as we have the FSWP draw, most likely the CRS for FSWP will fall. Now this is a very funny situation that we are in, where CEC applicants might be praying that no FSWP draw happens in next few months, because that helps them. The FSWP would really be praying that this whole situation settles down. So let's see how it turns out. But the good thing this time around was that the number of people entering 450 to 500 wasn't that large. And and that means that offshore applicants now have a better chance. My own analysis, and I'll share this with you, that if we look at least between people between the score range of 400 to 500, although you can take it 400 up until 1200, for every applicant in the express entry pool, and that's my own mathematics. Again, as I usually say, that this is not an official word, but this is my own analysis, my own calculation. For every 10 applicants in express entry pool between the score range of 400 to 1200, there is normally one CEC applicant, and there's about 9 excuse me, FSWP applicants. So that's the ratio. So if we get to have FSWP draw anytime soon, and if there's probably my prediction is that the very first draw which has FSWP in it, the cutoff score will be around 470. And if we have consistent draws after that, which is every say 2 to 3 weeks, and the number of invites is around 3500, most likely in about 2 to 3 draws, we will see the cutoff CRS falling to about early 460s. Again, that's dependent on quite a lot of variables as to how many people enter the pool, how many countries we get to see the the IELTS and ECA being processed. See, it's very, very important right now, because we, for this whole situation, not only that we have to have a look at how things are in Canada, because Canada is the one who is going to process all this, but then an important factor is that how are things working out in at least the major source countries. So if you're talking of major source countries, that's China, that's India. India is a very big contributor towards the skilled migration streams. Pakistan, it's Nigeria, it's Vietnam, Middle East, where you have all these nationals from these countries, but a lot of them actually apply from there. So UAE, Qatar, Saudi, all these places. And if you look at these major, Turkey's there, Vietnam is there. If you look at these major source countries, a lot of them are under lockdown. So the situation is that even if IRCC decides on opening their processing or inviting the FSWP candidates today or tomorrow, a lot of people will be stuck, that they will not be able to proceed with collection and submission of their documents which are required as part of the application. So there's no point in doing these draws and then having people stuck in it, not having the ability to submit documents, and then there is processing delays. So that's very important. We have to wait and see. And I'm talking on this because I know even in the chat feature there will be a lot of these questions, and this is a common question: when is the FSWP draw going to happen? So keep in mind, until and unless things sort of settle down, not only in Canada, but in some of these major source countries as well, that is when probably FSWP draw will happen. In Canada, in terms of the situation, we are moving towards opening up here in Toronto, in the Greater Toronto area. We've had the second phase of business openings. The hairdressers are opened. I have my appointment for 1:30 today, so I'll get and have a haircut and get back in shape as well. So things are sort of settling over here, but now it is important that at least the major source countries, once they have their situation under normalcy, I think that's when FSWP draw might happen. So that's an update on that. In terms of CEC within the pool, I think if the pattern continues, most likely the CEC CRS, and again the disclaimer is that if the same trend continues, if there's CEC specific draws every 2 weeks, Next particular draw, looking at the numbers in the pool right now, I feel that the scores might actually drop another 5 to 6 CRS points. And my own opinion is that we will not have an FSWP draw in another about 4 weeks. So I am looking at the CEC cutoff scores going down to close to 420s. Um, um, Plus minus a few CRS here and there. Yeah, so that's a little bit of an update on that. In terms of one of the updates, and this is specifically for applicants from Pakistan. For those of you who are applying for their ECA through CES, in the current situation, what CES has done is that you're not required to submit attested copies of your educational documents from HEC. You just have to upload the HEC attested original scans on their portal, and they'll process it themselves. The process might take longer, and we all know CES already takes about 3 months, 3 to 4 months to process. So this might add a little more time, but you're not supposed to provide that through HEC. What else? So in terms of, I wanted to touch a little on for today's session, a little on Canadian business visa. So because I've had a lot of queries on this. So in terms of, because a lot of people are not able to qualify under the express entry or under the skill streams, so people do ask me about different business streams. So just touching, I'll do a whole session on that, but probably one particular week where we will talk on that. So there are two different ways, two different broad categories if you're looking for business migration to Canada. Each of the provinces has an entrepreneur stream where you can, there's a point-based system. You are assessed for your net worth, like how many assets you own. For your business experience, your business credentials are looked at, what is your sales revenue and all those things. And then you submit a business plan, which is, if accepted, you make an investment and you move to Canada. This leads towards the PR. This is one stream that you have. This can take a year to 2 years to be approved, and also at times this can the good thing about this one is that you are able to have a very clear pathway where you move in on a business work permit, and at the end of that, once you're able to satisfy the provincial authorities that your business plan has been working, you get permanent residency. The other option is where you can come to Canada under the owner-operator business work permits stream, where it's a federal program, if you want to call it, where basically you buy a business in Canada. There's no requirement to show any net worth or anything like that. You just buy a business in Canada or start a business in Canada. If you're buying a business, you must be the majority shareholder. It can be any legitimate business which can provide employment to a few people. So you move in, you run that business, and normally once you've run that business for about a year, you're able to apply under the express entry, where as the senior manager of that business, you get points for confirmed employment under NOC code 00. So these are the two major business options that you have. Realistically speaking, if you're considering immigrating to Canada through a business stream, more so for the owner-operator stream, you must be looking at an investment of about $100,000 and above, ideally $150,000 to $200,000. So these are the two major options that we have. I will move towards the questions that we have, and one by one I will try and answer. So the first question is from Navpreet. Hi sir, a couple of days back, lots of news were doing the rounds that non-essential LMIAs have been put on hold. Please advise the reality. If yes, do you work on the same so that we can seek help? So first thing, I am authorized to do all kinds of immigration matters. I any immigration matter. I'm not licensed for Quebec because I'm not French speaking, so I can't really deal any kind of French. I'm sorry, a Quebec-based immigration matter. Other than that, anything that you need help with, my firm can definitely do that. We do not arrange job offers. That's something that I don't really do it. I will do a session on that sometime. But there's a lot of fraud, and there's a lot of fraudulent practices. So I'm not involved in arranging any job offer. LMIAs, work permits, I can and my firm can definitely help you with that. In terms of your question about complete ban, it's not that there is a ban, but you're right. What has actually happened, and this is where a lot of people who are not licensed immigration advisors, they create all this anxiety for all you people, and false perceptions within the market. Um, some requirements have been raised. For non-essential LMIAs, now the requirements that were there previously, now the requirements have been raised, and there is going to be more scrutiny. There are delays, but officially they've not really stopped processing LMIAs. So that's how it stands officially. Um, the whole reason that non-essential LMIAs are being processed at delay, or there is high scrutiny, is for the purpose that right now we are going through tough economic times, and once we go out of this whole situation, there is likelihood that economically things might go down. Um, bringing in people, foreign nationals, who are not required for essential work, might actually put more pressure on economy, and that will mean that the permanent residents and the Canadian citizens who are already here in Canada, they'll have to face more competition. So that's not something that the government wants. But there's no official policy that these LMIAs have been stopped. No. Uh, Dream Canada, what's the next cutoff prediction of CEC draw, and what's the lowest CRS score you expect would be picked up in CEC profiles? So, as I mentioned, if the trend continues, um, it seems that next CEC cutoff should be another 5 CRS points less than what it was right now. So we might see 426, something around that. Your next part of your question, what's the lowest CRS score you expect would be picked up in the CEC profiles? Now there's a lot of variables, and I'm not going to predict that, for the reason that, what if they don't do a CEC draw from now onwards? Then the cutoff will go back, because then there will be FSWP draws. We don't know how many more CEC specific draws they will do, so that's dependent on that. If there is if the next draw is again a CEC specific draw, about the same number of people being invited, and we have this draw 2 weeks from the last one, then it might drop another about 5 CRS points. Yeah. Rajesh, what about 430 CRS for next draw? Is it CEC draw or FSW? See, CEC or FSW, anybody who says that they, other than IRCC, who says that they know that next draw is FSW or CEC, is completely bluffing. And I don't like doing that. I won't do that. My opinion, looking at the situation, and I've already put the facts on the table, that it's Canadian situation, and then you have to have a look at the source country situation as well. So if the situation in Canada has improved, but if situation in source countries does not improve drastically, then most likely FSW applicants will not be invited. They will only be invited once there is a realistic possibility of majority of FSWP invitees being able to obtain and submit the required documents, which we all know right now is not the case. So next draw will be CEC or FSW. I can't predict about FSW. Looking at the current trend, yes, CEC seems more likely. Your question about 430 CRS, I'm not sure which category are you. If you're saying CEC 430, very strong possibility. If you're saying FSW 430, that's a very long stretch, very long stretch. KKK, hi Shariq, hope you're keeping well. Another week went past with the CEC PNP draw. Will July see NFS still? KK, hi. I'm doing well, and I'm praying and wishing the same for you. Yes, another week, no FSW pre-draw. When will this happen? I've already sort of answered that. Moving on, we. So, PF says, thank you, you're welcome. Please need a forecast for EFSW and how long file treatment will take for a single person. Do you think that there is a hope to leave before 2020, or should we give up? Will all be delayed to 2021? Now, in terms of the file processing, now that's what I've been reiterating, that those applications which are already in processing, many of them are seeing delays because of the reason that there is a lot of verification. Like, majorly your application might be processed in London visa office, but if you're a resident of Bangladesh, or if you're a resident of Pakistan, or if you're a resident in India or somewhere in Middle East, there's a lot of verification which or processing which happens by the relevant High Commission. And we understand that most of the staff is not there, so they're not and then not just that, say for instance, if you're in Sri Lanka, you're an applicant over there, and the immigration officer or Canadian visa authorities, they have to do some kind of verification from the local authorities. Now, great likelihood is that a lot of offices of those local governments are closed as well. So unless they have those clearances, those security clearances and all that, how can they finalize the application? So this is the case with current application. And that is the reason that a lot of times, that is the reason that they're not inviting FSWP applicants in new invitations, because this will be delays, and that will put a bad mark not only on the performance of IRCC, but that will cause frustration in applicants who've applied as well. So that's how it is. In terms of your questions about processing delays, there are delays for sure. Once you submit your application, PR application, 80% of the applications are supposed to be dealt within 6 months time. Some can take more. So as long as the document is there, it's not a very tricky case. It should still be processed. If there are delays because of the confirmations from local governments, that's a totally different thing. I wouldn't rule out 2020, very honestly. I don't think that the non-FSWP thing can continue forever. There is a limit to the CEC applicants that they can have. So definitely there will be FSWP draws. It might be a month from now, it might be 2 months from now, but they can't really continue on with just the CEC applicants, because there's a certain number who are in that pool, and they have to look at the quality of overall applications as well. And Canada would never want to give a message that it has closed itself to skilled people outside of Canada. So it will not go on forever, for sure. So don't lose hope. 2020 will see FSWP draws. Vinay, when will come federal trade worker draw? Please tell me, sir. In terms of federal trade worker draws, that's the most unpredictable of any streams. So you can't really say when it will happen. Some of the provinces have done their specific draws. Federal trade draw, no predictions at all. Ajay, in Express Entry address history section, do I have to add every address I've lived as a renter in Canada? Can you just give general information about what information should be included? Well, Ajay, that's a very case-specific question. I don't know what is the length of your stay in various places, but yes, you have to provide details of every other place that you've lived. You can omit, but and it might get unnoticed, but that's not something that I would ever recommend. You have to provide details of every place that you've lived at, and that's important for security clearances, and they need to know a few things from there. So yes, every place that you've lived, provide evidence of that. Alain, any update on travel restrictions ending? It seems that things are moving towards normalcy. Some of the airlines which were not operating previously, like foreign airlines which were not operating as much, they have come up with with a more frequent flight schedule post 30th June. So that does indicate, and because this communication is done between the government of Canada and those particular airlines, or the particular government of that country. So it seems that there might be some leniency. It might be in phases, wherein not everybody might be allowed, but it is believed that post 30th June there will be some opening up. Up until now, there's no official news as to what exemptions will be provided, but it seems that some travel relaxation will be done. What would be the tie-breaking rule? Dream Canada, a tie-breaking rule cannot be predicted. It cannot be predicted for the reason that you have to understand that what is tie-breaking rule. So tie-breaking rule is that if they do a draw, and a draw happens on any time, and the cutoff score is 430. Now the likelihood is that at 430 there will be multiple applicants. So say they have to pick the top one on 430. Say they had 3,000 people and 2,999 people were above 430. So that's done. They need one more person. So they look at 430 and they'll see who is the oldest of all the profiles at 430. Now, whoever is at 430, the oldest one, that particular date becomes the tie-breaking rule. So you cannot predict this. Maybe they had to pick 5 on 430. So it will be the top 5. So, anybody who says that there isn't any formula, I would say even IRCC cannot predict the tie-breaking rule, because it's just a random draw and they pick. So tie-breaking rule cannot be predicted. Your next question was for 420 score. So nobody knows how many people are there on the score of 420. IRCC might know as of today, but when the draw happens, nobody knows on that particular date. So tie-breaking rule cannot be predicted. Pritesh, hello sir, I received ITA last week. I have a daughter and she's in custody with my ex. IRCC asking me to upload medical certificate for the daughter, but ex-wife is denying to provide medical. If you have a child which is in custody of their parent, and that was an ex-spouse, now this becomes a tricky situation. If you would want to discuss that and maybe use my services, you can send an email. In general, if you do not get that kid to have, if you're not able to provide the required documentation and the medicals for that kid, you might not be able to sponsor that kid as for PR anytime in future. And there are certain exemptions that if you have such a situation where you have contacted the previous spouse, you have to provide some documentation for that, and then you might be given some leverage. So this is a tricky one. This has to be handled with care. It depends if you would want to sponsor that particular kid later or not. Okay, Ajay has mentioned Premier Ford said he doesn't want to open the border yet, and many provinces suggest the same. So restriction will postpone, in my opinion. Uh, yes, that's true. That Premier Ford has said that, and by no means is that I'm saying that restrictions are going to be taken away. When I say that the restrictions, it is for people who are living here. So that was the first phase. So the restrictions that have been taken away are for local people. So and it doesn't really mean. I believe you are in Canada, so you would understand that um, um, Mississauga, the whole Peel region, and Toronto had the second phase of restrictions being lifted on the 24th, when the whole of province had it on 17th. So it can vary, but businesses are opening up for sure. So that is how that is where we're moving towards. The rules with regard to social distancing have been relaxed as well, and the policy of allowing people to come from outside, the policy of issuing FSWP invites is not with the provincial government, it is with the federal government. And we all know that these are two different entities, in terms of operations, in terms of their policy as well, because Doug Ford is from a different party, and the federal government is currently through a different party. So what Ontario says doesn't really impact the IRCC processings. Um, Sorry for the program, because there is limitation on how much I'm gonna do. I need to mention visitor record extension I got after my work permit expired. You have to provide all details of your immigration history. And do I also need to mention if that I was in employed status after my work permit? These are very case specific questions that you have, Ajay. Um, you have to provide all record. If you have not provided it and later on it is proved, this can be misrepresentation. If it is something that you cannot provide genuinely, you could mention that in your letter of explanation, but not mentioning any material fact can be consequential, and this can be taken as misrepresentation, and I would not advise that. Such case specifics, until unless I have the whole case in front of me, honestly speaking, I do not provide advice, because that's a legal advice and counseling, and that I cannot provide without knowing all the details. um, Shayamal, I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Is it possible to get ITA with 421 CRS score off with spouse? I'm CEC candidate. If I'm not accompanying her, then my score will be 443. 421. It might only be possible if we have two more CEC specific draws. So yeah, if you can wait for two more draws, then it might be clear. Non-accompanying wouldn't be a bad option either. Because you're far off, so I can't really say if it would go to 421. More recently, I have a client who was in a similar situation. He with spouse had would have been 439. All alone would have been 445. He got the ITA and then he waited. So he waited for like two more draws. As soon as there was a PNP draw, he declined the previous ITA, created a new profile, and next day he got the ITA. So he's now into he has an ITA with his spouse, and he's going to finalize the case. Actually, he's going to be with me to take. So you could if you have the ITA already, you could wait for two more draws. If it doesn't go close to that after two draws, proceed with your ITA as non-accompanying spouse. If you see that there is a PNP draw and the scores have already fallen close to 421, you could decline it, delete this profile, make a new profile before the draw, and take that chance. It is Sachin. Can FSW CRS score goes below 447 in September 2020? Um, no likelihood of FSW score dropping down to 447 in September, even if we get to see consistent draws. First thing is, when will FSWP draws start happening? And it will start with something around 470. If we have draws every 2 to 3 weeks, it might go to 450 something, but 447 is a bit of a stretch right now. Um, Alain, any update on travel restriction ending in Canada for other nationalities aside the USA border? As I mentioned, that it seems with US the thing is different, because US is so badly impacted by the virus itself that that is one of the big reasons that they've closed the movement. With some other countries, there is a possibility, but it will be in phases. I wouldn't see a complete opening right after 30th June, but some restrictions are being lifted. Hamza Afzal, Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam, Hamza. Which is the best state to immigrate to in your opinion? Now this is a very vague question, I must say. Best state to Canada has provinces, first thing, and best. I live in Ontario. I love Ontario, but then there's a lot of things that I love about Quebec. There's a lot of things that I like about British Columbia. So best state in terms of what, you need to sort of specify that question. Every state, every province has its own benefits. Ontario is the biggest province in terms of population, the economy, so it's great. There's a lot of South Asian community over here, so now you feel at home. But then the cost of living is very high. Quebec, brilliant, beautiful place. A very European culture, so you find that kind of things, cafes and festivals, but then you need to be good enough in French to actually really survive over there in terms of work and all that. Move to British Columbia, it's not as cold, like at least the Vancouver part, but then the cost of living is very high. So it depends as to what are your personal choices and what options you have. If you have multiple choices, then definitely you can pick and choose. But if you're looking at wherever you get, you only have the option of one or two, then I would say the whole of Canada is pretty similar. The weather is cold. If you have to choose between a little cold and very cold, it's going to be cold. It's a huge landmass, so open spaces everywhere. The development is everywhere, so absolutely no issues with that. You can pick any of the provinces. Alain, when is the border agent or migration officer resuming work fully? So the border agents, the Canada Border Service Agency is working full time. They're no stopping into that. Immigration officers, they are working. All officers are working. It is just that officers who were offshore, who were deputed in different high commissions and consulates and embassies of Canada around the world, most of them have been called back, but they're still working here in Canada. So if don't don't be confused with the fact that where they're working, they're working. Yes, if they're not working in their normal office, there are delays and stuff. So the department is working. Um, Zenobia, hello Shariq. I've been working as an operations manager in my father's company. He started as a sole proprietor and hired me as his manager. How can I provide reference for my work experience? If it is genuine work experience, if he started working as a sole proprietor, that might be an issue because that was not a registered firm. If it was a registered firm and you were working there genuinely, provide the genuine documentation, and then you have to explain the situation if you think that it is not clear. But if you've been working genuinely on any position, there's absolutely no issue. If your father started a firm and that was legitimate work that you did, just provide employment reference letters just as anybody would else from somewhere else, and that's absolutely fine. You will definitely have to provide documentation to support, like if you paid any taxes in the country that you were in, if there was any other employment benefits, EUI, GP fund, that will definitely strengthen your case. Ajay, I have all the documents, so we'll provide all the information. Thank you, Shahzad. I appreciate the answer. You're welcome, Ajay. Good luck with that. Zenobia, also, I'm currently obtaining all the certification necessary for becoming a business analyst. So will these be enough to get me hired as a junior business analyst in Canada? I'm not a HR or a recruitment person, so I can't really comment on that. You will have to check on some other forum. My background is immigration and immigration law, so that's what I can suggest. So you need to check with the relevant bodies who look at business analysts. Or should I go for operations manager? Now, if your question is about picking the right NOC code, once I have your detailed responsibilities, we could look at that. In terms of picking the NOC code, the job responsibilities that you've had, you can pick them. Also keep in mind that if you immigrate to Canada and you nominate a specific NOC, it's not that you're only required to work in that particular NOC. Once you immigrate to Canada, you can work in any NOC. It can be completely different. So say for instance, you nominated because you had your work experience as a marketing manager somewhere and you nominated 0124 and you moved to Canada under that NOC. Now, once you move to Canada, it is your choice. You might start working as a truck driver. You might start working as, you might do a degree in law and you might start working as a lawyer. Once you immigrate and you become a PR, nobody can compel you to work in the same profession. So choosing your profession or NOC for immigration is one thing, and moving to Canada and then working in a certain profession is another thing. So these are two completely different things that you have to have a look. For your immigration purpose, pick the NOC which is closest to the work experience that you've had and for which you can provide the experience letters. Prashant, are OSWP holders are allowed to travel into Canada? If yes, any specific documents needed to be carried? I think you meant SOWP, the Spousal Open Work Permit. If that is the case, it depends what is the status of your spouse in Canada. If it is a necessary travel, spouse can definitely travel, yes. The way it will work is that it's not a specific document. You have your work permit with you, so that authorizes you to travel. But once you land here, the Canadian Border Service Agency, CBSA officers are going to ask you, and you have to convince them that why was this a necessary travel. Spousal reunification is an important thing, but then it has to be shown that why was this a necessary travel. So that's what you have to convince them. You could also write to immigration and communicate that you are intending to travel and this is their reason, and you can have a reply from them as well. Alain, thank you for the answer. I was just trying to find out the length, possible delay if you have already applied, since most workers are done at CPC. Each case can vary, Alain. You've asked that what is the average delay. So each case can vary because there are different dynamics for each case. It is not the right thing for me to sort of give a blanket thing for everything. There are delays, as I said, that normally. Um, 80% of the applications are supposed to be finalized within 6 months. So that's the turnaround time that IRCC would want to work on. But there can be slight delays in the current circumstances. I would say that add 1 or 2 months into your processing. It's not that decisions are not being made. Decisions are being made on all applications which are under processing. I've had my own clients have decisions in last 2 to 3 months. There have been decisions on temporary visas as well. So it's not that the processing is not happening or decisions are not happening. There is delay. So just stay put. I know it's frustrating for everybody, but stay put. The processing is happening. Um, And then Zenobia, okay, thank you so much. I was worried about the NOC thinking. Thank you for clarifying. And Prashant has said a thank you as well. So that's all the questions that were there for today. I think it's time to call it off. We are already at about 50 minutes time frame. Lovely having all of you. Hopefully I was able to answer your questions and provide some guidance on it. We'll be back with another live session next week. If you have other questions and queries, you can send an email, and one of my staffs should get back to you. You can post a comment on the video, and I'll try my best to answer. Just keep in mind that some of the very specific queries that come, at times it's difficult to answer them without having all the information. And such advising is only possible because I'm under a license, so I cannot be providing such kind of advising without having that client counselor relationship. So you do understand. But anything else where I can answer and I can provide guidance, I try my best. So sorry if I've not been able to provide answer to some very case specific things, but I'll try and my best and guide all of you for whatever I can. DF, why it takes more than 6 months? What are the reasons specifically for a single person? There can be a lot of reasons. Security clearance. One of the officers is not satisfied on anything. There can be a variety of reasons. An application is to be reviewed by multiple officers, multiple departments. Your name might get stuck with some security clearance issue. So there can be a lot of issues. Yeah. So that's all for today. Thank you for tuning in. For some of you who are regular over here, I'll see you next week. For those of you who are watching for the first time, I'd highly recommend subscribing to my channel, supporting me in building this channel. Stay safe, stay well wherever you are. Till the next time that we meet, take care, and Allah Hafiz.